In the quiet town of Fairfield, Tennessee, a police canine named Rex receives an order that would shock everyone: attack Agnes Cooper, a gentle, elderly woman suffering from Alzheimer's. But instead of lunging, Rex softly places his head in her trembling hands, as if greeting an old friend. Could this dog remember someone he's never met? As hidden secrets of the past resurface, Fairfield will discover that miracles can happen through loyalty and love.
Fairfield, Tennessee, nestled among rolling hills and lush farmland, was known for its quiet charm and slower pace of life. Early autumn painted the leaves in hues of amber and crimson, and crisp breezes swept gently through quiet neighborhoods. Tonight, however, the serene rhythm was broken. Dark clouds gathered ominously above, blotting out stars, and the air felt charged, hinting at an approaching storm. Sunflower Hills, Fairfield's only nursing home, was an old brick building surrounded by neatly trimmed gardens and rows of cheerful sunflowers that now swayed nervously in the night breeze. It usually exuded warmth, but tonight something felt distinctly off. Sheriff Hank Whitmore, a stout, broad-shouldered man in his late 50s, stepped out of his patrol car, his boots crunching on gravel. Hank carried a natural authority, his hair gray at the temples beneath his faded brown sheriff's hat. His face was kind but weathered by time, worry lines etched deep around sharp, observant blue eyes. His uniform, always impeccably tidy, even in haste, reflected his meticulous nature and military past. Fairfield trusted him implicitly, and he trusted only one companion more than himself, his canine partner, Rex. Rex was a German shepherd, 8 years old, muscular yet beginning to show faint signs of age and silver patches around his muzzle. His coat was a rich sable color, sleek and well-maintained, though his paws were scarred slightly from years of hard work and courageous rescues. Deep amber eyes radiated intelligence and loyalty, his ears perpetually alert, reacting to even the slightest sound. To Hank, Rex wasn't just a dog. He was family, a dependable comrade who had saved countless lives. As they approached the nursing home's entrance, the front doors swung open abruptly. Amy Lowell, the home's administrator, hurried toward them. Amy was a slender, middle-aged woman with short, curly auburn hair and sharp, anxious green eyes behind thick-framed glasses. Usually calm and collected, tonight her pale face betrayed deep concern. "Hank, thank God you're here," Amy said breathlessly. "Security alerted me that someone broke into the gardens about 20 minutes ago, but the cameras malfunctioned and we can't see who it was." Hank nodded, hand resting reassuringly on Rex's harness. "Anyone missing or injured?" Amy hesitated, pushing her glasses up nervously. "We're checking on everyone, but Agnes Cooper isn't in her room. She might have wandered out again." Agnes Cooper was 78, frail in build, with silver-white hair pulled gently back into a neat bun each morning by the nurses. A former elementary school teacher, Agnes once brimmed with cheerful wisdom, nurturing and patient. Alzheimer's, however, had slowly eroded her bright spirit. Now Agnes often sat silent, her pale blue eyes distant and uncomprehending, her smiles infrequent, memories slipping through her fingers like grains of sand. The staff adored her, yet often feared for her safety during episodes of confusion. Hank's brow furrowed deeply, understanding Amy's worry. "Rex can find her. Just keep everyone calm and inside." Turning swiftly, Hank clicked his fingers. "Search Rex." Rex instantly sprang forward, sniffing intently, his nose close to the ground. His tail stiffened, ears twitching as he quickly identified Agnes's familiar scent, leading Hank into the nursing home's garden. The garden, bathed now in moonlight, filtering sporadically through thickening clouds, was eerily quiet. Flowers rustled lightly. A chill whisper hinting rain was imminent. At the garden's far end, beneath a sturdy oak tree, Hank spotted a figure hunched silently on a wooden bench. He sighed quietly in relief. It was Agnes. Approaching cautiously, Hank called softly, "Mrs. Cooper? It's Hank Whitmore. Are you all right?" Agnes didn't respond, her slender frame motionless, staring downward as if hypnotized by something in her hands. Hank's heart softened at the sight. Agnes wore her usual simple blue cardigan over a nightgown, slippers dirted by garden soil. Her thin shoulders trembled slightly from cold or perhaps fear. Rex, however, suddenly stopped short, head tilting curiously, emitting a low, uncertain growl. Hank glanced sharply at his dog. Rex never hesitated, never showed uncertainty. "What is it, Rex?" Hank asked quietly, puzzled. Without warning, Agnes lifted her face slowly toward them, her eyes strangely lucid for a brief moment, holding something tightly, a faded, worn dog collar. Her voice cracked gently, barely audible. "Sammy. He came back. Sammy." Hank knew that name. A beloved retriever Agnes had once owned years ago, long before Alzheimer's took hold. Sammy had died peacefully over a decade ago. Hank felt a chill run through him. Before Hank could approach further, his radio crackled sharply, jolting him from his thoughts. "Sheriff Whitmore." "Come in," came Deputy Tom Baxter's voice, tense and urgent. Tom was younger, lean, and energetic, eager but sometimes overly cautious. "We just got another call. Someone spotted a stranger lurking near the East Wing." Hank hesitated, glancing at Agnes. "Stay put, Tom. I'm bringing Mrs. Cooper back first." "No time, Sheriff," Tom pressed anxiously. "We need you right away. Might be dangerous." Conflicted, Hank eyed Agnes, who remained quietly absorbed, lost in her memories or hallucinations. Reluctantly, he issued a quick command. "Rex, stay here. Watch." Rex instantly obeyed, settling attentively a few feet from Agnes, though his eyes still flickered warily between her and the collar she held. Hank hurriedly disappeared into the darkness toward Tom's position. Minutes ticked by, punctuated only by the rustling leaves and distant muffled voices. Suddenly, another shadowy figure moved toward Agnes and Rex from behind a row of thick bushes. The figure halted, startled by Rex's intense gaze. Rex growled low again, ears flattened defensively. The figure stepped cautiously into the moonlight. It was Harriet Baker, an elderly resident and Agnes's closest friend, slightly shorter and stockier, with curly gray hair and warm brown eyes. She often acted like a protective older sister to Agnes, despite being only a year older herself. Harriet wore her floral night robe loosely belted, clearly having slipped unnoticed from her room. Seeing Rex's posture, Harriet whispered calmly, "Easy, Rex. It's only me." Rex, recognizing Harriet's voice, relaxed slightly. She approached Agnes gently, concern evident on her face. "Agnes dear, come inside. It's chilly tonight." Agnes seemed unaware of Harriet's presence, still captivated by the collar. Harriet reached out, touching Agnes's shoulder tenderly. "Agnes." Finally, Agnes turned slowly to Harriet, her eyes wet with tears. "Harriet, Sammy's back. He came home for me." Harriet hesitated, startled. "Sweetheart, Sammy passed a long time ago." Agnes shook her head, childlike determination in her voice. "No, Harriet. I heard him barking. He found me." Just then, Rex rose suddenly, tense and alert. Something was wrong. From the shadows, heavy footsteps approached hurriedly. The following morning in Fairfield dawned under a soft, overcast sky, the sunlight filtering weakly through the low-hanging clouds like a memory trying to push through the fog. The rain never came, but the air was thick with dampness and silence, as if the entire town was still holding its breath after the night's strange encounter. Inside Sunflower Hills, the atmosphere remained tense yet hushed. A few residents wandered the main corridor, guided gently by orderlies, while the morning news played at low volume on the lounge television. But down a quieter hall, in room 203, a nurse was watching more than just vitals. Diana Matthews had started her shift just before sunrise. She was 28, slender and bright-eyed, with dark curly hair tucked under her blue scrubs cap. Her pale skin was dotted with freckles that always deepened when she was flustered, and this morning she looked decidedly flustered. Diana was known in Sunflower Hills not just for her medical precision, but for her unshakable patience and intuitive way with memory loss patients. She often stayed after hours just to sit and listen, because sometimes listening was the only way to hear what Alzheimer's had left behind. Agnes Cooper sat quietly on the window seat, wrapped in a knit shawl, staring out into the garden as if waiting for someone who never quite arrived. Her expression was unreadable, but her hands fidgeted with a weathered scrap of cloth that once held the old collar. Diana knelt beside her. "Good morning, Miss Agnes. Did you sleep well?" Agnes didn't respond, but her lips moved faintly. Diana leaned in. "Did you say something?" "Buddy," Agnes whispered. It wasn't the first time Diana had heard that name. She tried gently. "Is Buddy someone you know?" Agnes's gaze flickered toward her, the pale blue of her eyes sharp for a heartbeat. "He was brave. He was all we had left." Diana blinked. She stood slowly and crossed the room to the cabinet where they kept residents' personal effects. Inside a box labeled Agnes C., she found a small, leather-bound journal wrapped in tissue. She'd seen it before. Agnes's late husband's war log, or so the staff thought. No one had read it in years. Opening the journal, Diana flipped through delicate pages filled with tight cursive. One name appeared repeatedly, Buddy, but it wasn't a person. The entries told of a K-9 unit named Buddy, who had served in Vietnam alongside Agnes's husband, Corporal Matthew Cooper. In one faded entry, Diana read, May 19th, 1969, Da Nang. The heat was unbearable today. Matthew said Buddy sensed something before the attack. He pulled him down just in time. That dog, he's more than instinct. He's hard. I stitched Matthew's arm, but it was Buddy who saved his life. Diana's pulse quickened. She set the journal down, absorbing the possibility. Could Rex somehow be connected? In the hallway, Sheriff Hank Whitmore had returned. His expression was sterner than usual, lips pressed into a tight line as he stepped into the front office of Sunflower Hills. Behind him, Rex walked with quiet alertness. No leash, no hesitation. He always stayed at Hank's left side unless commanded otherwise. Amy Lowell, the administrator, looked up from her paperwork. Sheriff, is everything all right? Need to ask you some questions, Hank said, removing his hat respectfully. About Agnes Cooper, and about last night. Amy tensed. She's resting now, but she seems stable. Diana's with her. I'm not here to arrest anyone, Amy. But that break-in wasn't a prank. Someone was watching her. I'm starting to think it might not be a coincidence. Behind Hank, Rex sat still, but his ears twitched. He recognized the scent trail from last night. It lingered faintly in the carpet and in the very walls. He gave a quiet, low rumble in his throat. Not a growl, but a warning. Just then, another figure entered the office. Morning, Sheriff, said Edward Mulligan, a retired Marine and longtime resident of Sunflower Hills. Edward was in his late 70s, tall but stooped with age, wiry white hair combed back, and a long scar down the side of his neck from shrapnel he never talked about. His gruff demeanor and sharp tongue often kept visitors at bay, but he had a soft spot for Agnes. Eddie, Hank nodded. You knew her husband? Matthew Cooper. Edward scoffed lightly. Knew him better than most. Served with him. And I knew that dog of his. Buddy, damned smartest animal I ever saw. Amy frowned. Edward, don't start spinning tales. They're not tales if they're true, Edward growled. I saw that mutt drag 3 soldiers out of a burning Humvee. And last night when I saw that shepherd you brought, Sheriff. Rex, is it? I'd swear on my life, he moved just like Buddy. Hank rubbed his jaw. Dogs don't reincarnate, Eddie. Edward smirked. No, but bloodlines remember. Back in Agnes's room, Diana was watching as Agnes tapped her fingers slowly on the window glass. They buried him, she whispered, in a place with no name. I never got to say goodbye. Who, Miss Agnes? Diana asked. Buddy, I begged them to let him stay with me after the war. They said no. Classified. Government. Diana stared at her, then made a decision. She opened her phone and quietly began searching military K-9 archives. Within minutes, she found a declassified file from 1972. Buddy, KSR 13, German Shepherd. Handler, Corporal Matthew Cooper. Status, lost in field operation, presumed Kia. She turned to Agnes slowly. Was Buddy's call signed? KSR 13. Agnes looked at her for a long time, eyes trembling. Yes. How could you know that? Diana felt the goosebumps rise. Outside, Hank was examining the perimeter with Deputy Tom Baxter, now slightly red-faced from the prior night's blunder. Tom was eager to prove himself useful. I checked the east wing, Tom said. Footprints. Small, sneakers. Someone definitely slipped in from the side trail. Keep digging, Hank replied. And if you find anything linking that break-in to Agnes, bring it straight to me. Back in the garden, Rex sat under the same oak tree from the night before. Harriet Baker joined him quietly, placing a thermos of warm broth on the bench beside her. Still watching over her? Huh, she said softly. You're not, buddy, but maybe you're part of something he left behind. Rex looked at her and, almost human-like, leaned his head gently against her leg. That night, as storm clouds finally broke over Fairfield and rain drizzled onto the flower beds, Diana sat in her small apartment, scanning through the old war journal again. One page caught her attention. Taped to the back was a yellowing photograph. Agnes, young and smiling, seated beside her husband. And in front of them, sitting at attention, a striking German shepherd with piercing amber eyes and a faint scar on his front leg. Buddy. She stared at the photo. Then she looked at her phone, where she had taken a picture of Rex just hours earlier. Same eyes, same scar, same presence. The coincidence felt impossible, unless it wasn't. The wind carried a sharpness that morning in Fairfield. The rain from a night before had washed the air clean, leaving a chill that bit in a bone. Fallen leaves clung to the sidewalks like scattered memories, and the gray skies above Sunflower Hills seemed to press down, heavy with something unseen. Inside the nursing home, lights flickered slightly from the lingering moisture in the wiring, and the usual hum of morning routine had gone quiet. People spoke in whispers. Tension simmered beneath the surface. Sheriff Hank Whitmore stood near the east garden entrance, arms folded, expression unreadable. His uniform, crisp as always, seemed more rigid today, as though preparing for something unpleasant. He had barely slept, spending the night reviewing every detail from the incident report. Agnes's behavior, the break-in, the photo Diana had shown him, and most of all, Rex's hesitation. Beside him, Rex sat still and alert. His ears were perked, tail unmoving. He sensed something had changed, though he didn't yet know what. His dark amber eyes shifted subtly between Hank and the door that led to Agnes's wing. Hank had received a call that morning from Chief Wyatt Collier, the regional director overseeing rural law enforcement. Wyatt was a stern bureaucrat in his 60s, balding, with a clipped voice and no patience for sentimentalities. He had insisted on a formal behavioral check of Rex, citing operational uncertainty and potential liability, especially after the dog's refusal to obey a direct command the previous night. You need to verify that Assets still responds appropriately, Wyatt had said. If not, he'll be reassigned to controlled retraining. Now, Hank waited for the nurse to escort Agnes to the garden. His jaw clenched. Diana Matthews arrived first, holding a clipboard and visibly upset. Her dark curls were tied in a tight bun today, lips pursed in concern, eyes wary. "You're really doing this?" she asked. A woman with dementia and a dog who showed compassion. "And that's a problem?" Hank exhaled heavily. "It's not my call, Diana. Orders came from Collier. You could have said no. I could have lost Rex." Before Diana could answer, the garden doors opened, and Agnes Cooper was slowly wheeled out by a new aide, Marcus Leland. Marcus was in his mid-30s, tall, lean, with buzz-dark hair and faint tattoos trailing up his left wrist. A recent hire, Marcus kept to himself, rarely spoke unless spoken to, and wore a guarded expression that made others uneasy. But his work had been efficient, and no one had reason to distrust him. Yet, Agnes looked frilier than she had even yesterday. Her pale skin was paper-thin under the gray knit blanket wrapped around her shoulders, and her eyes, though glassy, searched the garden as if chasing something she couldn't quite see. Her hands clutched the worn collar tightly to her chest. "She doesn't understand what's happening," Diana said through clenched teeth. "She doesn't have to," Wyatt's voice interrupted coldly. The regional chief had arrived silently, dressed in a long, dark trench coat, clipboard in hand. His presence seemed to mute even the wind. "Sheriff Whitmore, begin the assessment," Wyatt said flatly. "Issue the standard control directive. We'll observe behavior and reaction time." Hank stared at Rex. The dog looked up at him, awaiting a command. "No muzzle," Marcus asked with a smirk, arms folded. "We don't muzzle dogs who don't bite without cause," Hank answered. Then, without further warning, Wyatt nodded. Hank hesitated only a moment longer. Then, voice firm and clear, he called, "Rex, engage target." The world seemed to stop. Rex tensed, his body prepared instinctively, muscles coiling, but his eyes remained locked on Agnes. Then something in him faltered. He paused. His ears twitched, and instead of moving toward her with aggression, he tilted his head slightly to the left, curious. A moment passed, then another, and then, with slow, deliberate steps, Rex walked, not charged, toward Agnes. Diana held her breath. Wyatt stepped forward, confused. Marcus's expression shifted into a scowl. Rex reached the wheelchair and lowered his head gently onto Agnes's lap. The woman blinked, her hand trembling as it reached out. When her fingers brushed his head, a soft sound escaped her, a quiet, childlike laugh. "Buddy," she whispered. "There you are." Rex closed his eyes. No one spoke. Even Wyatt was struck silent. Hank's face shifted from command to disbelief, then awe. Diana's eyes filled, and she stepped back, overwhelmed. Wyatt finally muttered, "Unacceptable. Unacceptable." Diana snapped. That dog didn't attack a confused old woman. He comforted her. "What exactly is the threat here?" "She's a civilian under investigation." The dog ignored protocol. He followed a different kind of protocol, Hank said quietly, the kind written in something deeper than commands. Wyatt scowled but said nothing. He turned and began scribbling on his clipboard. That's when Harriet Baker, Agnes's loyal friend, appeared in the hallway, holding a small box. "She's had this since the 70s, she said softly. "It was sent home after her husband died. She's never let anyone throw it out." Inside was a black and white photo. Agnes and her husband standing proudly beside a military K9 with deep amber eyes and a faint scar on its foreleg. A tag hung from the dog's collar, KSR 13. Marcus, still leaning against the doorframe, snorted. "You people and your fairy tales. Dogs don't remember the dead." Harriet narrowed her gaze. "You say that like you know." At that moment, Rex turned, his amber eyes landing squarely on Marcus. He let out a low, unmistakable growl. "What's his problem?" Marcus muttered, stepping back. "He's picking up on something," Hank murmured. "And Rex doesn't growl for no reason." Wyatt turned to Marcus. "Return the patient inside." Marcus moved quickly to grab the wheelchair handles, but Rex stepped in between. His body language changed, no longer gentle, but protective. Hank stepped forward, hand near his belt. "That's enough. I'll escort her." Marcus hesitated, then backed away, his face carefully blank. As Hank slowly wheeled Agnes back inside, Rex at his side, Wyatt stayed behind in the garden, staring at the photo Harriet had left on the bench. Diana lingered in the hallway, watching Rex with a new kind of reverence. She turned to Harriet. That wasn't a coincidence. He remembered her. Somehow he did. "I know," Harriet replied. "And someone upstairs knows, too." Inside room 203, Agnes was tucked in a bed, Rex lying on the rug beside her. Her hand rested on his head as she drifted to sleep. The following day broke with a thin veil of mist hanging over Fairfield, giving the small town a dreamlike, almost ghostly atmosphere. The trees in Sunflower Hill's front yard stood motionless, shrouded in dew, as if the world was holding its breath. Inside the nursing home, the staff were unusually quiet, walking on eggshells after the previous day's strange incident in the garden. The story of Rex refusing to attack and instead nestling against Agnes Cooper had already spread across town, stirring curiosity, disbelief, and a few raised eyebrows. Diana Matthews, in her navy scrubs and a thick cardigan wrapped tightly over her shoulders, was sitting in the break room flipping through the dusty war journal again. Her eyes scanned each line, searching for something, anything, that could further link Rex to Agnes's past. The picture Harriet had handed her still lingered in her mind. That solemn German shepherd beside Agnes and her late husband, with the same amber eyes and scar on the leg. Just then, the door creaked open and Edward Mulligan entered. He moved slowly but deliberately, a worn leather folder tucked under one arm. Edward, with his weathered face and stiff gait, carried decades of war inside him. He didn't say much, but when he spoke, it was always measured. "Found this in my trunk," he said, setting the folder on the table in front of Diana. "From Nam. Hadn't looked at it in years." Diana opened it carefully. Inside were aged photos, letters, and folded documents. One image caught her eye, a black and white shot of 4 soldiers crouched behind sandbags, with a German shepherd front and center. The resemblance was uncanny. Same scar, same eyes. Diana looked up at Edward. "Did you know this dog?" Edward nodded, tapping the corner of the photo with one finger. "We called him Buddy, but his designation was KSR 13. That dog could smell a landmine 10 yards out, track movement under jungle fog. Saved my hide more than once. He looks like Rex. He moves like Rex. That's what's got me shaking." Diana bit her lip. "You think it's possible he remembers?" Edward sighed. "I've seen stranger things in war than memory. That kind of loyalty doesn't die easy." Meanwhile, across town at the Fairfield Sheriff's Office, Hank Whitmore stood behind his desk, staring at a whiteboard where photos and reports from a recent string of petty theft had been pinned. Over the past 3 weeks, several homes near the edge of town had reported missing jewelry, wallets, and even prescription medication. Nothing major, at least not at first glance, but the timing, so close to the incident with Agnes, had made some townsfolk whisper. Wyatt Collier, the regional chief, had made sure to imply suspicion toward the nursing home. An elderly resident with dementia wandering outside during the time of the first theft? You don't find that suspicious, Sheriff? Hank knew Agnes. She wasn't capable of those things. But to clear her name, he needed proof. He turned to Deputy Paula Ricks, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 40s with short, practical hair and a quiet, calculating demeanor. She'd grown up in Fairfield and knew its people and corners better than anyone. Dressed in her brown deputy's uniform, she stood with arms crossed. "You said the latest theft was 2 nights ago?" Hank asked. Paula nodded. "Mr. Jacob Ferris. Lives near the edge of Creekside. Reported his late wife's bracelet missing from his nightstand. Signs of forced entry? Nope, but muddy shoe prints on the porch, size 10. No one in his house fits that. Marcus wears size 10, Hank muttered. New aide at Sunflower Hills. No background check on record. That bother you?" "Only a lot," Paula replied. Hank stood. "We'll visit him tonight." Quietly, back at Sunflower Hills, Rex was behaving strangely. He paced the hallway, nose low, tail stiff. Occasionally, he'd stop and stare down a hallway or sniff the base of a wall. Diana noticed and followed him. When he paused at the end of the west corridor, one rarely used except for utility access, he let out a soft, persistent whine. "Something there," Diana whispered. Rex scratched at the linoleum floor briefly, then turned and trotted off. Diana looked up and saw Marcus Leland approaching. He wore his usual expression, impassive, unreadable. Dressed in black scrubs today, he seemed to blend into the shadows. "You following the dog again?" he asked, voice flat. "He's curious," Diana replied calmly. "Dogs notice things we don't." Marcus gave a dry chuckle. "Or sometimes they just want attention." That night, as the wind picked up outside and the town grew darker under thick cloud cover, Hank and Paula pulled into the rear parking lot of Sunflower Hills. They didn't use lights. They didn't knock. Instead, they entered through the side maintenance door, keys borrowed from Amy Lowell, who had begun to doubt Marcus too. Inside the supply room near the west hallway, Paula lifted a floorboard slightly loose at the corner. Beneath it, wrapped in a zippered hoodie, were multiple wallets, watches, a silver bracelet with JF engraved, and a small bottle of oxycodone. "Gotcha," Paula whispered. A sudden noise behind them made Hank turn sharply, hand going to his holster. But it was only Rex, who had slipped into the hallway, gaze locked beyond them. Then Marcus appeared. "You shouldn't be back here," he said coldly. You've got some explaining to do, Hank growled. Marcus's eyes flicked to the floorboard. For the first time, his mask slipped, just a fraction. He stepped back. Rex growled low, stepping forward between the officers and Marcus. You gonna have your mutt bite me? Marcus spat. No, Hank replied, but I trust his judgment more than yours. Marcus didn't resist as Hank cuffed him. Paula read him his rights, voice steady. The next morning, word spread quickly through Fairfield. The thefts had been solved. Agnes Cooper was no longer under suspicion, and Marcus Leland had been a wanted petty thief from Missouri using a fake ID. Diana and Edward shared the news with Agnes, who seemed unusually lucid that morning. I told you Buddy would find them, she whispered. Rex sat beside her, tail wagging gently. The storm rolled in just after midnight. A cold wind howled across the fields of Fairfield, rattling the shutters of Sunflower Hills and carrying the scent of wet earth and something older, something buried. Inside the nursing home, lights flickered as thunder cracked across the sky, and rain tapped steadily against the windows like fingers reminding everyone that the night was far from over. In room 203, the bed was empty. Diana Matthews had just finished her double shift and was preparing to leave when Nurse Carla Hensley burst into the staff room, breathless and drenched from the short run across the courtyard. Carla, a stout woman in her early 40s with streaks of gray in her curly brown hair and a perpetually worried expression, held a clipboard trembling in her hands. Agnes is gone, she panted. Her windows open, bed untouched. No one's seen her since dinner. Diana dropped her bag. What? That's not possible. Her doors alarmed. Carla replied grimly. It was disarmed somehow. We're checking the logs. Within minutes, the call reached Sheriff Hank Whitmore. He was already half awake, having sensed the storm would bring trouble. He threw on his coat, grabbed his radio, and whistled sharply. Rex, lying faithfully by the back door, snapped to attention, his tail flicking once in alert. The dog's ears twitched. He already knew who was missing. They met Diana outside Sunflower Hills, where the rain had soaked the earth into thick patches of mud. Diana's hair was damp, curls clinging to her temples, and her face was pale with worry. She's barefoot, Hank. In this weather, she won't get far. She doesn't need to, Hank replied. She knows exactly where she's going. Rex sniffed the window frame, then darted toward the fence. He paused briefly, nose pressed to a wet footprint, and then took off down the rear trail that led into the wooded path behind the home. Diana ran after him without hesitation. Hank followed close behind, flashlight beam cutting through the trees. Why would she leave? Diana asked between breaths. Because something in her remembers, Hank said. And it's not done yet. They emerged from the trees onto a narrow road, and beyond it, just visible beneath a swaying street lamp, was the iron gate of the Fairfield Veterans Cemetery. The gate stood slightly ajar. Inside, rows of white headstones gleamed faintly under the moonlight, the rain making them shimmer like polished bone. Rex moved cautiously through the rows, his body tense but not fearful. And then he stopped. Agnes Cooper stood beneath an old oak tree at the edge of the cemetery, her figure barely visible in the mist. She wore only her nightgown and shawl, both soaked, her hair blown loose by the wind. In her hand, she clutched the faded dog collar. Her gaze was fixed on a single grave. Matthew Cooper, Corporal U.S. Army, 1944 to 1971. Beloved husband, never forgotten. Hank lowered his flashlight. Agnes, he called gently. She didn't turn, but her voice carried on the wind. He never came home, but Buddy did. He's here. Rex stepped forward, slowly, reverently. He approached her without command, sat beside her, and bowed his head to the grave as if recognizing the name carved in stone. Diana's breath caught. Agnes finally turned. Her eyes, usually fogged with confusion, were clear. He was never just a dog, she said softly. He was part of him, and now, he came back to finish the promise. Neither Hank nor Diana spoke. Even the storm seemed to hush in that moment. Suddenly, Rex let out a soft whimper, then began to dig at the wet grass near the base of the headstone. His movements were slow, deliberate, not frantic. Like he knew. What's he doing? Diana asked. Hank knelt beside him. Maybe remembering. Under the loose soil, they uncovered a rusted tin box. Inside were letters wrapped in plastic, a photo, and a worn patch that read KSR 13. A tag fell out, buddies. Agnes touched it with trembling fingers, tears streaming freely now. Meanwhile, back at the sheriff's office, Deputy Paula Ricks was reviewing security footage recovered from Sunflower Hill's back hallway. Her sharp eyes narrowed as she replayed a clip. Someone had overridden the alarm system from the maintenance panel minutes before Agnes's disappearance. The figure wore a black hoodie. When they turned slightly, Paula froze. It wasn't Marcus. She paused the video and enhanced the image. It was one of the newer orderlies, a man named Henry Waller, early 30s, quiet and unremarkable, recently hired through a third-party agency after Marcus's arrest. He had short, sandy blonde hair, a slight build, and a permanent slouch that made him look invisible. And that was the problem. No one had paid enough attention. Paula radioed Hank immediately. "Sheriff, we've got a second intruder. Confirmed tampering with the door. Name's Waller. Background check just came in. He was dishonorably discharged from Fort Bragg 3 years ago. Larceny and impersonation. Sent a unit to his last known address." Hank replied calmly. "Keep it quiet." Back at the cemetery, Diana helped wrap Agnes in a dry blanket. The old woman was exhausted but peaceful, her hand resting on Rex's head. Hank turned to Diana. It wasn't just the memory of Buddy. It was something deeper. This dog he knew. "You think it's possible?" Diana whispered. "That he carries Buddy's memory?" Hank shook his head slowly. "I don't know, but I've never seen anything like it." A flash of headlights broke the silence. Paula pulled up beside them, window already down. "We got our guy," she called. "Trying to leave town. Says he was paid to keep an eye on the dog and the old lady. Didn't say by who." Hank's jaw tightened. "Get him back. We're not done yet." As Paula drove off, Diana looked back at the grave. "There's something unfinished here, Hank. I can feel it." Agnes, now wrapped in warmth and memory, whispered, "So can I." Rex remained still, his head resting gently on the gravestone, as if guarding it, or mourning it, or simply saying goodbye again. The sky above Fairfield was a pale, endless blue the morning it happened. No wind, no clouds, just sunlight filtered through autumn leaves that shimmered like stained glass. The townspeople had gathered outside Sunflower Hill's nursing home, lining the path from the entrance to the garden. Rows of folding chairs had been set up, and in front of them, a small wooden platform had been constructed beneath the same old oak tree where it had all begun. A podium stood in the center, adorned with 2 photographs, one of Corporal Matthew Cooper in uniform beside a dog named Buddy, and the other of Agnes Cooper, older now, smiling gently with her hand on the head of a very familiar German shepherd. "Rex." Sheriff Hank Whitmore adjusted his collar and surveyed the growing crowd. It wasn't just townsfolk. There were reporters from nearby counties, veterans in dress blues, and even a couple of military representatives from the Department of Defense. The town had never hosted a ceremony quite like this. Diana Matthews stood beside the stage, reviewing her note cards with shaking hands. Her blue scrubs had been replaced with a navy blazer and tan trousers, her hair carefully brushed and pinned back. She had spent the past 2 days coordinating the event with the mayor, reaching out to military contacts, and speaking with a woman named Dr. Melissa Grant, a senior records analyst from the military K-9 Heritage Division. Dr. Grant was tall and athletic, in her early 50s, with a sharp jawline, graying hair tied into a sleek bun, and a quiet confidence in the way she carried herself. She had arrived the day before, traveling in from Fort Jackson with documents that changed everything. As the ceremony began, Mayor Rose Whitaker, an elegant woman in her early 60s with silver blonde hair and a voice honed from years of public service, stepped up to the podium. Her tailored blazer matched the golden tones of the autumn landscape behind her. "Today," she said, "we honor not just a bond between woman and animal, but a legacy, a thread that has connected our past with our present, not through blood, but through memory and loyalty." Behind her sat Agnes Cooper, wrapped in a pale shawl, her hands resting on Rex's broad back. Her eyes were misty, but clear, focused. Rex sat still beside her, proudly wearing a polished military service vest that Diana had helped him into. His amber eyes were alert but soft. His body held the posture of ceremony, honored, calm, and utterly present. Then Dr. Grant took the stage. She unfolded a document and addressed the crowd. Following recent investigations, including recovered artifact from the Vietnam War and DNA lineage testing conducted at the DoD's K9 program lab, we can now confirm that Rex, designation RX, K982, is the direct bloodline descendant of KSR-13, known to many of you as Buddy. Gasps rippled through the audience. Agnes closed her eyes, as though a quiet truth she'd always believed had finally taken root. Rex's behavioral match to Buddy is not coincidence, Dr. Grant continued. His responses, his protectiveness toward Mrs. Cooper, and even the scar formation on his left foreleg, almost identical to Buddy's, suggest a remarkable genetic memory we are only beginning to understand. Diana stepped forward next. Her voice wavered slightly, but steadied as she found her rhythm. This town witnessed something profound. Agnes Cooper didn't just remember the past. The past remembered her. And Rex? He's living proof that love, even when buried in war and time, can find its way back. The audience fell into respectful silence. Then Mayor Rose declared the moment everyone waited for. Today, we hereby declare Rex an honorary veteran K9 of Fairfield County and lifelong companion to Mrs. Agnes Cooper. The crowd erupted into applause. From the front row, Edward Mulligan, dressed in his old Marine blazer and medals, stood and gave a slow, deliberate salute. His voice cracked as he called out, "Semper Fi, Buddy." As the ceremony concluded, Diana stepped aside with Dr. Grant. "Do you really believe memory can pass through blood?" she asked. Dr. Grant smiled faintly. "I believe something more powerful than science lives in that dog. And I think it's got a name, devotion." Later that week, as Fairfield returned to its quiet rhythms, Diana unveiled the next chapter. She stood at the community center with a small sign behind her, "Memory Pause, Animal-Assisted Therapy for Cognitive Healing." The program would pair trained rescue dogs with elderly patients struggling with dementia and PTSD. With support from Sunflower Hills and funding from the town council, Diana had finally transformed grief into purpose. Among the volunteers was Charlie Jennings, a lanky, red-headed college student majoring in animal science. Charlie had freckles across his nose and a goofy grin that never seemed to fade. Raised by his grandmother after losing his parents in a car accident, Charlie had grown up with a deep respect for elders. He now knelt beside patients with Rex, helping to bridge the space between memory and presence. Rex, for his part, had taken to the role naturally. Though technically retired from police duty, his days now were spent beside residents, resting his head in laps, guiding trembling hands back toward moments they thought were gone forever. Agnes was no longer just a patient. She became the soul of the program. Her quiet presence in every session reminded people of what could still be reclaimed. One afternoon, she recited a poem from memory, a war poem her husband had once written. When asked how she remembered, she looked at Rex and said simply, "He brought it back." And perhaps he had. At the edge of town, in a small clearing near the cemetery, the community erected a stone plaque. It read, "For Buddy and Rex, who served beyond the battlefield, who remembered what we forgot, who came home." Sometimes, the ones who remember us are not the people we expect, but the souls who've walked beside us, seen or unseen, silent but faithful. Rex reminded us that love can outlive war, that memory is more than just thought. It's feeling, connection, loyalty. In a world that often forgets its elders, this story reminds us to listen, to care, and to believe that healing can come in the most unexpected ways, even through the eyes of a dog. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Leave a comment below and tell us your thoughts. Type them in if you believe that love, loyalty, and divine timing still exist. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the quiet miracles happening all around us. May God bless you and everyone you hold dear.